Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday. You made it. Woo! Another week down. Friday, December 20th, 2024. Time for another show. Time for another weekend. That probably should mean loading you up with all sorts of stories that you can use, I guess, at holiday parties. If we're still having those, and you can discuss the news with everybody and lament the fact that we are now, I guess, 1 month away. It's a month out from inauguration, whatever that means. And in a month from now, okay, Donald Trump. And, of course, it'll be day one in a month. And you know what's coming on day one. He's going to be a dictator, but only on day one, depending on which interpretation of his pronouncement you believe in and which audience you are, right? So I guess it's supposed to comfort us somehow. Well, I'll only be a dictator for one day, but one really rough day, and then we won't need it anymore. And my beautiful Christian friends, you won't have to vote anymore. Or if you're in the MAGA crowd, maybe more than a day, maybe a couple of days, maybe a year, maybe, maybe forever. Just depends on what the applause line is for the day. All right, well, lots to catch up on. Government shutdown now looming, and I think I can overlap my sound effects. So that means, well, which one should we do? Dramatic or horror dramatic? Horror dramatic. Okay. Minor key, because government shutdown. The major keys are all closed. So that's why we had to go with that one. And, so it was real interesting. I had a discussion last night, like real life, where I saw people face to face for the first time for the first time in a day, because I had seen people, and many of the same people, face to face the day before. But discussion of the government shutdown. We're in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, so a government shutdown is like active cocktail party chatter around here. Because everybody works for the government, knows somebody who works for the government, knows somebody who works for somebody who contracts for the government. The government makes things run here. And that's, one of the things that politicians complain about when they're out on the road. Of course, we're in Washington, D.C., they don't really understand. And we'll shut down the government, and then they'll feel the pain. This is why sometimes Republicans cling to the idea that that government shutdowns, and really the word Republican belongs before government shutdown. It's almost always them doing it, and they continue to cling to the theory that the people, the American people, will appreciate a government shutdown, or at least not notice a government shutdown, and then say, hey, see, the government, for all the money it spends and for all the ways it intrudes in our lives, doesn't actually do anything for me. And by the way, to some extent that works, only because the people who say these things then ignore or will not acknowledge or don't even originally understand what the government is actually doing for them in the background. I poured my own cereal and milk this morning, the adults say. The government had nothing to do with it. Of course, that milk is safe because government inspection. The cereal's safe because government inspection. It got to the store where you bought it because the roads are maintained. There's lots of going on in the background, but, abstract thinking like that when, I don't know, that's some deep stuff. Hey, The Bachelor is on. So that doesn't really occur to most people. And of course, now many of them Republicans, are actively demanding the right to have unsafe milk. I don't know really what that is about. I mean, there's a reason behind it, I'm sure, and it's, probably dumb and wrong, from my understanding, but like the raw milk movement, they'll stand there and tell you, no, science, something, holistic medicine, I don't know, whatever, more natural state, yada, 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 unprocessed, all true and all good. Some processes are good, like getting bacteria out of it. That's a good process. Pouring sugar in it might be a bad process. All right, so don't do that. But raw milk, the way nature intended. Nature intended that milk for a baby cow. And I don't know why you think that you need to have it, but all right. Did hundreds of generations drink it raw before pasteurization? Yeah. and they all died when they were 30 or 40 years old. So, whatever, history, science. But they're now all demanding the raw milk, and that won't have anything to do with the shutdown, but just one of those places where people insist that the government is not doing anything in particular for me. And it will be doing plenty for lots of people, even who think they're ignoring the government. Visiting someone for the holidays? Are you flying? Hello, right? And by the way, a lot of people wondering about that. What happens to the FAA and the TSA? Under normal circumstances, I think you've all figured this out by now, and we've mentioned it a couple of times. Under normal circumstances, those are just essential employees. They're declared so, for the most part, by the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. By the way, very powerful agency. Under the previous Trump administration, last guy running the OMB was Russell Vought, who is the guy who is the variously described as chief architect, chief author, but, there's a couple credits to go around, of Project 2025, coming back in the coming Trump administration. And on top of it all, a Christian nationalist. But hey, don't worry about it. But anyway, the OMB, fairly powerful organization when it comes to this stuff, and is usually the ones issuing the guidelines as to who does have to report, who doesn't have to report. And when they say has to report, they mean you have to report and we're not going to pay you. But for national security reasons, you have to show up. And then their reading usually of national security is kind of expansive. And, they usually don't screw around. And right now, the OMB is under the control of the Biden administration and will be for the next month. And government shutdowns rarely last longer than that. It's just now we have Elon Musk, who thinks he's the president, insisting that the shutdown lasts at least that long, that there be not only no government operations, but that Congress stop working to even try to find a solution to the shutdown, that there should be, at some point he put on, we think, I guess, he put on Twitter. Remember, none of this stuff is really truly verified. We're all doing this. We've shut down the government on the word of threats from Elon Musk / who we think is Elon Musk. I mean, I really don't know. Neither do you. He hasn't disavowed it, so there's no reason to, strongly doubt it. But again, we don't know where this stuff is coming from. And we got used to, for some reason, the idea in the first Trump administration that Trump could govern via Twitter, fire people via Twitter, make announcements, make pronouncements. And he usually would set an agency scrambling to try to do something as though he had, in fact, issued an executive order or some sort of directive from the White House as opposed to tweeting. I mean, he is, and the theory was he is the president, and we do think this is him doing this. So it should carry some weight. But, we rules-based, process-based people go back to, there's paper that has to move. And you thought it was archaic and dumb that it had to be paper-based, perhaps, as we've talked about how legislation works this way, that the other body can't actually do any floor consideration without having a copy of the paper that goes along with it. Whether that's a bill that they generated or came from the other house, and you can't start work until the papers arrive. And as we move towards a paperless society, isn't that kind of stupid? And don't we want efficient? And I imagine this is probably something eventually that falls under the umbrella of the fake department of government efficiency. They might try to demand to have some sort of say in all that and say, no, this is dumb, we don't want to do it. But the reason we do it is so that we don't fall into is that the president ordering a nuclear strike, or is that not? Has his account been hacked? And, can we tell the difference? And who's the president anyway? I mean, in this situation. So you're going to want to have some verification. And again, I guess I'll remind everybody in Congress, it's not just a measure of resistance that you can throw in the way of the Trump administration and throw sand in the gears. You should be, for your own peace of mind, demanding verification of everything that arrives on Capitol Hill that purports to be a communication from the president. Which president? I don't know. Are you sure he said it? Does the the actual president, which I guess we'll have to say for default purposes is Donald Trump, know that he did it. Both, he may have physically had a hand in it, but is he suffering from dementia? Does he have any idea what it means? Did someone hand it to him? Who is that person? I don't know. Did he sign it? Is that real? Yeah, we're going to have to make him come to Capitol Hill and declare these things and sign them in front of witnesses because, one, we don't know what's going on when it's on Twitter. I mean, suppose somebody hacks the damn Twitter account and just starts issuing orders and people start hopping, and then you find out later it was the North Koreans, or for that matter, anonymous here in the United States, or Romanians. I don't know. It could be anybody. So, all right, you're going to want to verify all of the communications from the White House and make sure they're real. But also, unique among presidents, I'll say, is that this one comes into office with a record of being caught red-handed forging important government documents that are meant to establish the authenticity of major governmental functions, like who won the election. In 2020, they just said, well, if we didn't win the election, why don't we hack the system whereby a new president's legitimacy is acknowledged by the legislative branch collectively in a joint session of Congress. And we can do that. All right, here we go. Got to fight with the microphone here. I muted it for just a second. I thought I had successfully said, hit the mute button, clear throat, though I'm working on it with a new set of teas from Scott. Thank you, Scott. We'll have to discuss this load of tea that I have at some point. But at any rate, you have a president coming into office who last time around, rather than, try and win election, actually just said, suppose we forged documents that said we did win the election. Now, all right, everyone has read the newspaper and found out that the other guy won the election. But suppose we stood there and said, nuh-uh, prove it, and just insisted that, no, the other papers are the real papers. What do people do? They're going to run around in circles, fretting, and maybe they'll fret for long enough trying to figure out the legalistic reason to explain to us, because, very few people know the mechanics of how to explain why this paper is the yes and the correct one and this one is not, and what are the necessary elements, and they don't have a Schoolhouse Rock for that. So it's not tough to me. I think it makes a certain amount of sense, but for a lot of people, they're well versed in the details of whatever they're into. This just happens to be my thing. So as a hobby, I understand this, but if you're forging electoral college votes, you don't even need to have done that for us to be suspicious of social media as a way of delivering presidential directives. It's just, it's just out of keeping with everything that we know about how government is supposed to work. It's just that very few people know that. I don't know. But if you're also caught red-handed forging things, then there's a pretty good reason to say, yeah, you actually have to come in here and show it to us and let us see you sign it and read it and explain it to us. That'll also have the effect of slowing things down. So where were we? Right. Government shutdown. We also were probably the only podcast to count down the days toward government shutdown, something like 2 months out, maybe even longer. I don't remember when the last CR got passed, but we just started. I immediately started the countdown because I was like, yeah, these guys are not going to be able to handle this, and they're going to ruin it again. And now they've set themselves up with a pre-Christmas deadline, which is supposed to prod them to action so they can go home for the holiday break, and they're going to screw it up because they're terrible at what they do. I don't know how long we've been doing this. I should go and check. But anyway, the discussion last night was, oh no, everybody thought there was a deal in place, and indeed there was. And the big news of the day was they blew up the deal because Elon Musk tweeted that he didn't like the deal. Then Donald Trump tweeted that he didn't like the deal. And now, of course, we're stuck in the drama of people correctly saying Elon Musk killed the deal and Trump has his people out there pushing back, and he has even been leaning on Elon. I need you to go out there and say that I'm the real president, and you were agreeing with me, not the other way around. So they're pushing this line. But anyway, everybody kind of thought they'll come to a deal. And right, as we said last night, they had a deal, and or the day before they had a deal. Elon blew it up. Plan B was what made it to the floor last night, but shouldn't have, because they had no way of passing it. And indeed, they got crushed. And I think even maybe the majority of Republicans voted against it. I'm sorry. They did come back with a fairly Republican bill. So some 30 plus, Freedom Caucus types voted against the bill, along with all the Democrats. Anyway, it was overwhelmingly defeated. And they had just come up with the Plan B because they didn't think they needed it, because they didn't think Elon Musk was going to blow up Plan A. So how are they doing on Plan C? Yeah, they don't have one yet. And, of course, the deadline is midnight tonight, which is more correctly described as midnight tomorrow, I guess. But what are we talking about? 12 hours from now. 15 hours from now. A little less. So I don't think so. There are a couple of legislative tricks that they can pull to try to get it done. But remember also, they got a couple of things working against them. One, of late, they have had no luck passing even clean CRs under regular order. That is to say, where you only need a majority vote, because anything that's designed to get a majority vote out of the Republican Party is unacceptable to the Democratic Party, and they withhold their votes. And with a 1, 2, 3 seat margin, anything that has anything objectionable to any one of the crazies of the Freedom Caucus or anywhere else. I mean, it could be that they appease the Freedom Caucus, and then there are some what pass as moderate Republicans who say, no, that's crazy. I'm not voting for that. And that's all it takes to blow it up. So they've been bringing things to the floor under suspension of the rules, which, then requires a 2/3 vote to pass and is much more bipartisan in nature in terms of the underlying legislation. But that didn't work. And now Democrats are pissed off. They had a deal. This is the line that they're sticking to here. And it's not the most forceful thing in the world. There's other better explanations. Like we've been saying, Elon Musk blew up the deal and nobody's sure who the president is. That's what we should be saying. And a few members are saying that. But the official Democratic line is there was a deal, and when there's a deal, you should stick to it. And you guys reneged on the deal, and now we're not going to do any more deals with you. It makes a certain amount of sense, too. But it's not as, I don't know, it's not as interesting to the broader audience, I guess, for these things. Anyway, so they don't want to do any more deals, so it's unlikely that they'll be able to use suspension, which means that they have to come to the floor under regular order, which means they need a rule for it, which means that the whole process takes a lot longer, and also means, they will also need to waive all of their other rules, like how long members will have to read the bill before it's considered, and they'll have a rule. There's a rule usually against considering a bill on the same day that it's made available or that it's reported out of the Rules Committee. You're supposed to have a certain amount of time, especially with some of these very large, dense, omnibus type bills that Republicans are always complaining about. They said, elect us and we'll go back to regular order, and they never did, and they were able to. So if they were to try to pass this thing by themselves with a rule, the rules are that you're going to have to wait a little while, and there's definitely going to be a government shutdown, even if just for a day or two, just to get through the rules of how long you have to wait for legislation. Can you waive those rules? You can, but in order to do so, you got to bring a rule to the floor waiving those prohibitions, and that requires, a majority to pass. Ordinarily, you can get even rebellious Republicans to get on board for a rule, but some of them are really mad, and it probably didn't help matters that when some of the Freedom Caucus guys like Chip Roy, although, I don't know, is he chiefly Freedom Caucus or is he elsewhere? But at any rate, he's, constant among the objectors. And he was objecting. He objected to the raising or suspension of the debt limit, which was a last-minute demand from Trump. And Elon Musk had his complaints, which, by the way, we should read a little bit about because they were mostly based on complete misinformation. He just totally, went on to Twitter, lied his ass off about the bill, riled people up about it. And because a Twitter influencer essentially told sitting members of Congress what to do about keeping the government open, they said, I read it on the internet, must be true. And it's not. Then Trump, in order to reassert himself in the process, said, I need to make a demand here too. And he demanded a suspension of the debt ceiling, I think until 2029, so that he would never have to deal with it during his next term, which is interesting because now he's thinking maybe my term will end in 4 years. So that was actually a good sign, I guess. But he doesn't want to deal with the debt ceiling. He doesn't want to be, have that hung around his neck. Trump raised the debt ceiling, and I thought he was supposed to control debt. So that was his demand. Chip Roy said, I don't vote for suspensions of the debt ceiling. It's just something I don't do. And there were a couple others who agreed with him. And then Trump got in a Twitter war, one-sided, screaming at, or he might have been using Truth Social for this, screaming at Chip Roy. He's a loser and an ineffective and a congressman and he's a do-nothing. I mean, all the stuff that he usually reserves for yelling at Democrats. It's all, made up. I mean, well, Chip Roy is a bit of a do-nothing loser. But, he's got a voice. Trump overstates everything. How when he fights with the New York Times, the failing New York Times, it can't get anything right. Well, we're angry with the New York Times a lot too, but, they're not as Trump describes them. Anywho, so it's been pretty wild. And, so a lot of people were caught by surprise because there was supposed to be a deal. And also, I mean, even as we were counting down the days, I kept telling you guys, there doesn't seem to be a great deal to be gained from having a shutdown at this point. Not only is it, rarely a good strategic move for anybody, but, they're on their way out. It's the holidays. They want to go home. The Congress is coming to an end. There's a presidential transition going on. They've won. They're going to have a majority in the Senate. They'll have barely a majority in the House. They'll have a Republican president who'll sign any crazy thing they send him. Why not just ride it out? Okay, fine, current spending levels for another couple of weeks. And then we'll have a look at the budget and reshape it in our image. I just thought that they would buy into that. And I forgot. Donald Trump just likes things to be on fire. And he came in and lit them on fire, and people listened, which they really should not have done. So, let's see. Is this, which is the one that had the whole thing about all of his stupid lies? Oh, yeah. Maybe it was this one. The Washington Post. A government shutdown looked unlikely. That was the problem that everybody was having last night. And then Elon Musk took to X, by which we mean Twitter, of course, not ecstasy. That may have been what he was taking, because he needed a lot of energy to stay up and tweet so maliciously about this bill. In a show of power, the subheader reads, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, and that is enclosed in scare quotes, and it should be, pushed House Speaker Mike Johnson to scrap a compromise spending bill. Who's telling us about it? It's Faiz Siddiqui, Jacob Bogaj, I hope, maybe, Jeff Stein, and Tony Romm, or unless it's Rome, but R-O-M-M. Sorry, guys. Everybody gets to read your name silently to themselves and never has this problem. Congressional leaders had lined up on Tuesday to approve a spending bill that would avert a government shutdown before Elon Musk, President-elect Donald Trump's, quote, first buddy, injected himself into the conversation in the wee hours of Wednesday morning with a 5-word post on X. And again, we don't know whether he was on X when he posted it, but possibly. Musk threw the process into chaos. This bill should not pass. You should not pass. Again, we should just get that sound effect. There's a couple of sound effects I need to grab. I have no room for them in the soundboard, though. This bill should not pass, and that's mild, among the things he said. The Tesla and SpaceX CEO wrote at 4:15 a.m., which, again, I don't know what time zone he was tweeting from, but, take a nap, guy. It was Eastern time. Terrific. All right. Well, it was 4:15 here. He may have been in California or something. Anyway, a message that reverberated across Washington, which is in Eastern time, where some took it as the strongest signal yet of the new reality under the head of the, quote, Department of Government Efficiency, Trump's non-governmental panel, which doesn't even exist yet, charged with finding ways to slash federal spending. Over the ensuing 12 hours, Musk went on a prolific tirade against the bill with more than 60 updates, some of which boosted false claims. Again, lied, but you know how newspapers are. And you got to wonder, am I going to be sued if I say he lied? That stood out even for a chronic poster like Musk, who has commanded an audience of more than 200 million followers by broadcasting his largely uninhibited views on the site he owns. And we should probably note at this point, when he says commanded an audience of more than 200 million followers, it is rapidly becoming the case that Elon Musk is simply requiring all Twitter users. It's like required viewing from the Hunger Games. He tweets, and they just, he's got this ability. He can have the engineers rig up the system such that every Twitter user is served his every utterance, whether they care about him or not, or whether they block him or not. So, he's got the audience, but it's kind of a captive audience. So, over the 12-hour period, he tweets some 60 times, calling it all sorts of things. He's had all the nasty names he had for it yesterday, I think. You remember, terrible, criminal, outrageous, horrible, unconscionable, crazy, and ultimately an insane crime. Okay. When we come back, we'll read through the rest of this article, I was wondering at the time, what is it that would make somebody say that a bill is an insane crime? Well, if you lie your ass off about it, I guess it's easier to understand.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We better get moving here. Only 3 segments left. Okay, well, we've spilled the beans about my own thoughts about all this stuff. What about the work of the Washington Post? So, as we mentioned yesterday and then just moments ago, Trump started going crazy. What's the other guy's name? Musk started going crazy on Twitter about how bad the bill was, ultimately saying it would be an insane crime to pass it. I mean, that's some strong language. Then he goes on to say, any member of the House or Senate who votes for this outrageous spending bill deserves to be voted out in 2 years, regardless of whether your term is over as a senator. Musk wrote shortly after 1 p.m. Wednesday to leaders in Washington, it appeared he was serious. This is what got me to say, that's a good point. It appeared he was serious. 1, how do we know? 2, why do we care whether he's serious or not? And I did see some very interesting writing. I didn't grab it for discussion, but we've kind of been over it. But some historians putting some real thought into the offhand musings of things that I had, said on the show. Not because I said them, but separately, I was wondering the same thing. What would the founders have to say about one guy having 300, now maybe possibly $400 billion dollars, because stock prices? Just saying, I have enough resources to fund races against every single member of Congress who gets in my way. And not a lot of them are really going to. So, I mean, if like, for instance, if he just was to target the 30 Republicans, or was like 38 Republicans who were against the bill, and he would get mad at them, I mean, I don't know whether Musk weighed in on how he felt about the Plan B bill that came to the floor and got defeated last night. He might have been okay with that one. But again, so say, let's say 38 members, and let's say he spends $10 million on each one of their opponents. Can he afford to do that? Sure, $380 million. But if you have $380 billion, that's 1/1000th of what you've got. Now, $380 million is not a small amount of money, but he just spent $270 million on one race. So, and that gives him the ability to credibly make threats of 10 million for other races, even if it's 38 of them. So it's a little scary. But I have seen some historians saying, yeah, this is like exactly what the founders had in mind and were worried about although they were thinking about it in terms of, well, who has the ability to amass that kind of wealth? Kings do. So, we want to write the whole monarchy thing out of our system of government, but mostly because it's a method not only for just personal tyranny, if you think that the monarch ought to be the head of the government, but also because they can amass the sort of gigantic piles of wealth that tend to keep them in power, because they can use them to pay off or threaten the people who get elective power. Anyway, back to the article. Here's what he was screaming about. To leaders in Washington, it appeared he was serious, and it appeared that it was actually him. Another one of my themes. Musk did not respond to a request for comment, which is also interesting, right? He's not denied that it was him, but I guess if you try to get out of him, can you give us a confirmation that that was actually you? You won't even get that, because he loves chaos even more than Trump does. Musk's word on the funding extension ricocheted around Capitol Hill as lawmakers jockeyed to invoke his Doge as reason to reject the legislation that would put off a Christmas-time government shutdown. It's good that they're seeing this, that they're seeing the failure of Congress now, so that they can start and so they can understand how to come after us when they get here. I don't even know what that means now that I think about it. Said Representative Eric Burleson, whose name I've only come to know in the last 3 days or so, an active member of the House's Doge caucus. What does this mean again? It's good that they're saying this, that they're seeing the failure of Congress now, Doge, so they can start and they can understand how to come after us when they get here. Okay, I think that's what that means. So that the Doge people, when they ride into town, will be able to hit the ground running with respect to beating up on Congress and making them do something. About an hour after Musk's threat of retribution, the billionaire followed up with a new directive. No bills, none. I don't know whether he means just funding bills or everything. No bills should be past Congress. I guess they mean passed by Congress until January 20th, when Donald Trump takes office. Uses his Twitter handle here, real Donald Trump. None, he added. Zero. Those things mean the same thing, of course. The approach appeared to work, as support fractured even among some establishment Republicans who earlier appeared inclined to support the measure. A large block of conservative rebels already opposed the bill before Musk got involved. Burleson posted on X that Johnson's funding bill was the very thing the incoming Department of Government Efficiency is trying to put an end to. A vote for this monstrosity is a vote against Doge. Good. Musk endorsed the sentiment. Absolutely, he responded. Alerted to the tech entrepreneur's endorsement, Burleson grinned and snickered. It's awesome, he said, fist bumping with a staff member while riding the subway in the Capitol basement. There is one, in case you've never visited. It's true. So others who are looking to ride the bandwagon are finding out what it means, why it's so invigorating and creates so much, giddy joy among the chaos agents. They see, I type it in here and it comes out there. This is exciting. And, no thought to the consequences. I'm becoming famous, thinks Eric Burleson. He's got Nancy Mace disease. Representative Andy Harris, who's also got a mild case, chair of the arch-conservative House Freedom Caucus, told the Washington Post that Musk's opposition aligned with Doge's goals, and he was getting results even before Trump takes office. See how effective he is? He's been given a huge responsibility to try to control the size and growth of the federal government. And I guess like a lot of people who are used to running businesses, they don't wait until tomorrow to start, even if they have to get hired. Harris said they're given a goal and they start as soon as possible and take a lot of ketamine. Underscoring the rapid pace of events, less than 12 hours after Musk first condemned the spending bill, the billionaire was taking a victory lap. Your elected representatives have heard you, and now the terrible bill is dead, he said. The voice of the people has triumphed. Well, one person anyway. Longtime political observers were stunned by the swift impact of Musk's interventions. Trump stayed largely silent on the measure through Wednesday afternoon, putting Musk in the unusual position of exerting more influence on the bill than the incoming president. Duly noted. Finally, by late afternoon, Trump, too, aired his opposition. Republicans must get smart and tough. If Democrats threaten to shut down the government, I mean, you see, obviously just telling you the opposite of what's going on here. If Democrats threaten to shut down the government unless we give them everything they want, then call their bluff, he said in a joint statement with Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. And then in all caps, this chaos would not be happening if we had a real president. We will in 32 days. But it was Musk who seemed to force the tipping point. Elon is having an incredible effect, said Gordon Gray, executive director at Pinpoint Policy Institute, a center-right think tank, who noted the real-time shift. I am struggling to recall another instance where an unelected public figure has exercised this kind of influence. Still, Musk's campaign relied on or repeated at least some false claims. Can't say lies. False claims. You ready for these now? Here they come. He reported, or rather he reposted, a claim that the legislation includes a, quote, 40% pay raise for Congress, calling it unconscionable. And that's the sort of thing that you could get roar out of a MAGA crowd saying, yeah, this is an insane crime. They're stealing our money right even as they're failing at their one job. A 40% pay raise. And no doubt the news that there was a pay raise included reached your ears, but if it reached it along with a report that it was a 40% pay raise, you too would say, now hold on a second, right? Well, the Doge account on Twitter also said that the legislation would raise pay for members of Congress to $243,000 annually, up from a mere $174,000. A mere. Right? So lots of people already think they're getting overpaid as it is. It's not the case really for the amount of work that even the non-workers there do. But okay. So what's wrong with that? I mean, as a claim. Well, it's unclear where that number came from, for one thing. The legislation includes language allowing a 3.8% pay bump to take effect, not 40%, 3.8. He moved the decimal point and rounded up, which would result in a pay raise for lawmakers of $6,600, far short of what Musk claimed, according to a statement from Representative Jared Golden, Democrat of Maine, who said he would oppose the bill because it allowed the pay raise. He was against that. Congress had blocked its own cost of living allowance increases since 2009, by the way, which is a good clarification. But, by the way, did you check the spin there on that, the framing? I mean, all of the truth of the matter is asserted here, so that's one thing. That's nice. But, again, Musk tweets, they're going to give themselves a 40% pay raise, $243,000 up from $174,000. Outrageous, unconscionable. And the correct side of it is attributed to a Democrat here, but just, again, check the way it's done, right? The legislation includes language allowing a 3.8% pay bump to take effect. $6,600, not that much. Not as much as Musk was claiming, right? Far short of what Musk claimed, according to a statement from Jared Golden. And then his bona fides there is that he will oppose the bill anyway. But as opposed to, well, I mean, that's just the plain fact. That's what the language says. And it's not according to Jared Golden. It's according to reality and what's typed on the page. Jared Golden gave the statement. That's true. And, it, might be nice to attribute him as a source for it. But, I mean, how about it will allow a 3.8% pay bump with a pay raise of $6,600 according to the objective truth of the matter, as established for us by Jared Golden, who sent us a copy of the legislation. But no, I mean, you're supposed to infer that, I guess, but we're at the point where you're really going to need to say that. If you're going to stop and take the time to enclose Department of Government Efficiency in quotes and explain that it's a non-governmental panel that, is not official, well, why not take the time to say, this is just objectively wrong. It is if you don't want to say lie, I don't even care that much next to this garbage about what euphemism for lie you use, although it is getting kind of irritating. But why not say, according to the reality of the situation? I don't care about Jared Golden. Don't bother telling me about that. If you want to tip your hat to him for sending you the paper, fine. Anyway, Musk also amplified false claims that the legislation included $3 billion in federal funds for a new football stadium in the district. Unconscionable. An insane crime at a time like that. This is not government efficiency. Well, remember, now the guy who's going to be making the calls supposedly about what is and isn't efficient in government, well, he says I just saved us $3 billion by eliminating this deal. No. In fact, and at least here it's simply attributed to fact, in fact, the provision would transfer the land where RFK non-junior stadium sits to the local D.C. government. But it provided how much funding? It provided no funding. And the city would still have to negotiate with the NFL or the NFL's Washington Commanders over a stadium deal, which is never a good thing to watch them do, but that's not actually the issue here. This legislation provides $3 billion in federal funds. You're off by, let me do the math here, scritchy, scratchy pencil noise, $3 billion. You're wrong. I mean, you're 100% wrong about that. I just saved $3 billion. You saved nothing. There was no money in there. Why are you tweeting that there's $3 billion when there's not? Like, where did you even get a number? And the answer is, I think in Musk world, he literally will tell you, make it up. I don't care. What am I going to do? Lose my government job? Lose the next election? There's literally nothing you can say to me. I can't even be held in violation of the terms of service of Twitter for this. He's limitless in what he can claim is going on and make apparently 200 million people watch him do it. Whether they all believe him or not, I don't know. Similarly, Musk shared allegations that the legislation included $60 billion. Now he saved us $63 billion. $60 billion in new aid for Ukraine. I can't believe it. I'm so angry. America first. I thought we were going to cut Ukraine off. This is Biden trying to sneak it in at the last minute, is I'm sure the reaction he was going for. 2 congressional aides and Brian Reidel, R-E-I-D-L, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, which is, by the way, very right-leaning, said that they have no idea where that number came from and that the bill appears to have how much for in new funding for Ukraine. Anyone ready to guess? I mean, based on the history here, you're probably guessing it or you're probably getting it. I see eyes lighting up everywhere. The bill actually contains $0 for Ukraine. Congress had approved $60 billion in aid for Ukraine last spring. And maybe that's what he's thinking of. Or maybe he's just making it all up. And Greg knows it.
That's bullshit.
That's exactly right, Greg. You have it correct. So once again, now he's off by 2 tweets in which he's claiming that he could scrap this thing and save the government $63 billion, and he is $63 billion off the mark. These things don't exist. Once again, it would be fairly powerful to say, we checked with the objective truth, and he is wrong about that. It doesn't exist. Not tell me, well, a guy at the Manhattan Institute doesn't know where it came from. A guy from Maine says that he's against this stuff anyway, but that it's wrong, according to him. No, it's not there. I have no idea what he's talking about. Where is that even coming from? Maybe the bill that passed in April, said one of the aides, speaking on condition of anonymity so that you don't take him seriously. I mean, that's not the reason why, but guess what happens? It's not in there. If you have any evidence of that, I'd like to know. And speak more strongly. If you're going to get an anonymous quote, then just say what Greg says. Just say it. It's not true. It's not there.
Wrong, sir.
Yeah, something like that, perhaps. That may be it. But the damage was already done. Little over a month after an election in which Musk put $277 million behind supporting Trump and other Republicans, the tech entrepreneur appeared to have successfully sunk a continuing resolution to shut down the government, except that what it is, a continuing resolution is not to do that. It's to avoid shutting down the government, but I hope you know what that means. Is there a way to read this in which it makes sense? Successfully sunk a continuing resolution. I see. Okay. He sunk a continuing resolution, and in so doing, shut down the government. I see what you mean. Successfully sunk a continuing resolution to shut down. I sunk it to shut down the government. Gotcha. A guy who dropped $250 million in the last election and doesn't blink an eye and can mobilize Republican voters through his social media platform. That's an intimidating guy, said Robert Weissman, a co-president of Public Citizen, a consumer advocacy group that supports limits on corporate spending in politics. So that's not going to be good. Having demonstrated his willingness to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, every politician knows they could be next, and the ones most vulnerable are Republicans who might be primaried. That's it. We made it through the article. So that's what he spent his day doing, is just telling untruths about it, knowing that he could never, in what forum could you possibly hold him to account for that? He's just a private citizen a-hole lying on social media. Yeah, call the cops. That's not going to do anything. But Republicans are listening to them. On the word of a lying Twitter influencer, they stopped a bill to keep the government open during a presidential transition on top of it all. So, it's a little weird and a little dangerous. The Hill was, I guess we should catch up on what's happening in terms of what comes next, because I think they're going to be voting on stuff again today, and they'll have to try to engineer a way to do it. Here's what the Hill has from us, from Mike Lillis, Emily Brooks, and Michael Schnell. Johnson says Plan C has been reached, I guess, to avert a shutdown, and a vote is expected. Speaker Johnson said Republicans have arrived at a Plan C to avert a shutdown, and the House will vote Friday morning, that's today, now, maybe, on the legislation. Yeah, we have a plan. Not just the concept of a plan, but a plan. Johnson said Friday morning. That's not terribly convincing. As he entered the Capitol, we're expecting votes this morning, so you all stay tuned. We've got a plan. He did not say what it entails, and he probably didn't quite know yet. Lawmakers have little time to avoid a shutdown. Government funding runs out when the clock strikes midnight late Friday. Of course, the clock strikes midnight early Saturday, but, what are you going to do? I like the Friday framing more than the correct Saturday framing we read about yesterday. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen punched himself in the face and fell down the stairs, and then stood up and talked about how tough he was, and then said on CNBC shortly after Johnson's comments on Friday morning that he thinks Washington will probably avoid a shutdown since, quote, we're pushed up against Christmas here, alluding to the likely path forward without directly confirming it, saying that will be up to the Speaker's office to announce. There's a chance today, a clean CR, short-term clean CR, for maybe 2 weeks, Mullen said. That was something that was discussed, late last night, even some discussions this morning. I'm not going to say that's going to happen, but and you do not know. That's really the option that's on the table. And I'm very tough. If Johnson does not move forward with a clean short-term stopgap, it is unclear if that will muster enough votes to clear the House. Oh, I'm sorry. If he does, I said does not. But if he does, even a short-term thing, it's not clear that they have enough votes. A handful of Republicans have historically opposed continuing resolutions in principle, I guess, is what they mean here. And Democrats have evaluated the Speaker's proposals on a case-by-case basis, two factors that are fueling the chance of a shutdown with so little time to spare. It's also unclear if Johnson's plan will appease President-elect Trump and his demand to raise the debt ceiling as a part of the bill. Friday's vote will be the latest effort by the House to fund the government ahead of a partial shutdown deadline, and it will come hours after the House on Thursday night voted down Johnson's Plan B bill that combined a 3-month government extension with $110 billion in disaster and farm aid, some other policy measures, and a 2-year suspension of the debt limit, the latter of which was a last-minute demand by Trump. Oh, and last night part of the discussion was us witnessing that Stephen Dennis, congressional reporter for Bloomberg, is that right? And I never note what outlets people work with. I just either see him on Twitter or I don't. But he hasn't moved over to Blue Sky as far as I know. But on Twitter, he was reporting that one of the things that ended up getting stripped out of Plan B, and then, of course, getting voted down. But they removed, among other things, you probably heard about funding for, like, childhood cancer research. Like, that was pretty startling. But they also removed a provision that would have imposed a federal government ban of some sort on deep fake AI revenge porn. Like, well, why are we blocking a ban on that? I don't know whether it would have been an effective ban, but I mean, it's the sort of thing that you ordinarily go, I don't know whether this is going to make any sense legally or not, but you're not going to find me voting pro deep fake porn. But, well, now you will. That's exactly what you'll find. That is what you removed from this. Like, put that back. Anyway, I don't see it getting a lot of discussion here. Stephen Dennis was tweeting around looking for the story of who said we should remove that. I'd like to know who's responsible for that, and no one wants to claim responsibility for it. And sometimes it happens at the staff level. The failed vote marked a blow for Johnson and Trump, who endorsed the package, urged lawmakers to support it, and threatened primary challenges, it should say, for anyone who opposed it. If you're going to threaten their primary challengers, then you're helping them. You see, that's just a typo. Aside from the debt limit increase, the Plan B proposal was a stripped-down version of initial funding deal that Johnson negotiated with Democrats and revealed earlier in the week. That initial bill included measures such as health care deals and an increase in pay for members of Congress, and ballooned the bill to more than 1,500 pages, prompting outrage from Republicans, Trump, Elon Musk, etc., that helped kill the package. Members were unsure Thursday night how they would solve the funding impasse after the Plan B failed. They will not only have to get a bill that can appease Trump and pass the narrow House GOP majority, but get an approval from the Democratic-controlled Senate and White House. That's a tough needle to thread. Johnson's comments Friday morning came moments before he was scheduled to huddle in his office with members of the far-right Freedom Caucus and at least two figures in the incoming Trump administration, J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, and Russell Vought, remember that guy? I mentioned him earlier, who served as head of the White House Budget Office in Trump's first term. Not OMB. And wasn't one of his former chiefs of staff also head of the OMB and then moved over to the right. White House Budget Office? That's different. Well, okay, but closely related. They work together. And I have a feeling he may have ended up as acting OMB director as well. Anyway, a long list of conservative House Freedom Caucus members trickled into the room after Johnson's arrival, including Chip Roy, before mentioned, Byron Donalds, Andy Harris, the chair of the group. None of them commented. And then, of course, it's going to be beautiful, GOP Whip Tom Emmer said. Okay, sure. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and House Budget Committee Chair Jody Arrington. I don't really know that I've heard his name a lot. Budget Committee Chair, though, also arrived at Johnson's office early Friday morning. Trump's last-minute demand to address the debt limit had drastically complicated the funding process. It emerged as one of the main sticking points in negotiations, which is drawing opposition from Democrats and Republicans. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries wrote on social media Thursday that increasing the borrowing limit at this juncture was a hard pass. Double entendre there. Likely playing a role in most of the caucus opposing the proposal that hit the floor today. On the other side of the aisle, conservative Republicans had criticized raising the debt ceiling without cutting spending. New bill, $110 billion in deficit spending, unpaid for. $4 trillion plus debt ceiling increase with $0 in structural reform for cuts. Time to read the bill, 1.5 hours, I will vote no, Roy wrote on social media. Congress is not expected to have a deal with increasing the debt until summer of 2025 is when they were next supposed to face that question. Okay, so that's where it stands legislatively. Now, Gosh, a couple of other directions that we might be able to go. Of course, the next break coming up here. So what might we be able to sneak in before that? Oh, probably nothing. However, there's a lot of interesting, weird weekend inclusions that we might want to shoehorn into the next couple segments. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, boy. There's a whole lot of things here. So let me start opening them up so that they're easy to find after the next break. I should check back in. Oh, no, right, okay. I saw something from Rosalind McGregor the other day in email, but interestingly, it's actually something that she wanted me to pass on to Greg, as opposed to necessarily reading on air. But, well, Greg, if you're listening, or if you're Russia, maybe something to think about here. And maybe some of the rest of you to think about as well. Oh, I got to play our break music. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Wait, we're a minute ahead of time. But isn't that pleasant anyway? It made it sound like we were, let's leave now. No, it's a lie. Don't listen. This is an idea floated by Malcolm Nance, who, I guess for people still remaining on Twitter and still actively participating here, this will not convince Greg, because of course he's got his own reasons for remaining on Twitter. And I mean, I still have an account there. And I do so, I maintain it there mostly for the purposes of when people follow me on Blue Sky now, I say, do I know that person from Twitter? And if so, then I'll follow them. Right. But now it's more useless because a lot of people have deleted their accounts, so I can't tell anymore. Greg is still harvesting news from there, but I don't know how much he's contributing to the content there. Anyway, the idea from Malcolm Nance is a great Twitter walkaway. Encouraging everybody who is now, there's the music, willing to in fact walk away from Twitter, either deleting their account or just leaving. I don't know. I think he wants deletions. Thinks that you should time it all for Inauguration Day. The moment Donald Trump is inaugurated as president is the moment that you should walk away and, I guess, delete your account and set the place on fire and make a statement. It's an interesting thing. I don't know how widespread it will be, but I guess if we spread the word about it, maybe more widespread. Think about it. All right, welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're going to hurry up. Once again, I'm prodding myself to move forward, but there's more background to cover. Here's something that I saw circulating on Blue Sky earlier today that I thought, we should maybe read through this. And, sometimes like most things, I'm reading through it for the first time with you. Hopefully it holds up, but it was an intriguing mention that got me to put eyes on it on Blue Sky, from Jennifer Palka. It's Pahlka, on a Substack here called Eating Policy. And I'm not certain whether this is this food chain policy or is it a joke about eating policy? I don't know. Well, we'll see if we can figure it out. But at any rate, she writes, Congress, it's in the title here, Congress, you might want to take a look at this. What might Doge have brewing? And she takes an interesting approach to this that I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it was intriguing enough to park it here. Last Friday's post, she writes, and it's linked here if you want to read that one, got a lot of very insightful comments. In response to one comment about the potential of using AI to break through the wall of complex law and policy, this user here, maybe Darrell Harb, I don't know, but it's you can read the link and get the username if you think that matters. But this was interesting. The idea that, and I've seen this floated, right? The Doge guys are very into this stupid technology stuff, and they say, well, we're going to use AI to fix the government, which, I roll. But maybe there's something kind of sort of to it, or at least something kind of sort of dangerous to it that we should look at. And the user writes, that is, I suspect, exactly what they're doing right now, meaning Doge, spinning up the AI systems that will be tasked with taking a comprehensive and detailed look at both the legal and regulatory structure and the expenditures. This is something that previous reform commissions never had the technical capacity to attempt before because the technology didn't exist. the most shocking thing I believe we'll see greater public awareness of because of Doge. This is not punctuated, should be, and it would insist rewriting it, if I were editing this. But again, the most shocking thing I believe we'll see greater public awareness of because of Doge is the degree to which even Congress doesn't know what is going on. Well, there's a lot of points to parse out in that, and Jennifer Palka will parse them out. But for just a second, if I could stop you. One, AI is something that the other guys didn't have, and I guess you could start out by making the argument, and so that makes the Doge effort, if there is one, at government reform across the board. I mean, and there have been more serious, or what were regarded as serious attempts made at it in the past, reinventing government. Rego, when it was Al Gore in charge, or at least in charge of that effort. A number of the Simpson-Bowles Commission, whatever, lots of government attempts at reforms or understanding of spending or paring back or finding efficiencies. True, none of them have used AI. On the other hand, of course, AI sucks and does not know what it's doing and can't be relied upon for anything. But does it set them apart? It does. And it's an interesting idea, right? In theory, if AI worked, wouldn't it be something if we could have AI read everything the government has on its rules and regulations about spending and then kind of come up with some sort of synthesis? Yes, it would be interesting if AI worked. The problem is that AI does not work very well. And if you set it about the task of reading, what would we be designed for? Read everything there is. No human can do it. You do it. Well, one of the problems, of course, with no human can do it is that now no human knows whether the AI got it right or not either. But moving on to other points here, right? The most shocking thing I think we'll see greater public awareness of, whether it's because of Doge or not, is the degree to which even Congress doesn't know what is going on. And that also is true and important. And it's been a recurring theme in my own blogging / work for the past, I don't know how many years, 30, I guess. Not all of it spent blogging, but some of it spent in Congress finding out that, very often Congress does not know what's going on. They give you the impression that they do. Actually, this was something I meant to bring up when we were reading one of the pieces earlier with the typo in it. Because we know what's going on and have been following the story, we can recognize when it's a typo and just correct it. But sometimes, others read it and they haven't been following along and they just come away with a mistaken understanding and they say, well, it appeared like in a legit newspaper. It said this, and they go on in life in general with the completely wrong impression on something and say, but this was reported. Well, it was just a typo. I mean, unfortunately, you don't have access to the authors of the piece to tell you it was a typo. But also, unfortunately, you don't have access to the background to understand innately that it was a typo. But a recurring theme on this show, in my writing, and all sorts of things is the shocking frequency with which people who should know, or who you'd like to imbue with the power of knowing, even if they don't know. Everything from, well, I don't know. I guess one of the more famous examples of my own, in my own work, well, the most famous example, of course, was the nuclear option. We need to do something about the filibuster. It stands in the way of all sorts of progress. We should be reforming it. We should be eliminating it. Here's some proposals to, how it should be changed. Yeah, well, the problem is, say, members of Congress, members of the Senate who know it's not true, or who once knew it was not true, saying, yeah, well, that's not the way things work. You can't change filibuster practice with a majority vote. It's a rules change that you'd be talking about. In order to pass a rules change, you need a 2/3 vote because you can filibuster rules changes. That's one of the problems. That's why we've never changed the filibuster rule. But you have changed the filibuster rule. Well, it's been a long time. No, you actually did it. Some of the members of the Senate at the time had voted for these things and then just forgot. But for the longest time, the answer from members of Congress is, well, I'd love to be able to do it that way, but that's just not the way it works. Pat, pat, pat. Very good for you on trying to learn civics, but that's not the way it works. Well, actually it is. No, thank you for trying to teach me a lesson about civics, but who do you think knows more about the way the Senate actually works? You, a loser from Blogland, or me, a United States Senator? Now, on its face, most people would probably be justified in saying, I think the U.S. Senator knows more about the way the Senate works. But as it turned out, it was loser from Blogland who knew, and many other people. I didn't make it up. Lots of other people knew that this was the case, including many United States senators who then went on to pretend that it wasn't the way it worked. And then that would be so around 2009, 2010, the standard answer when you taught people, grassroots people, about how it really could work and sent them to go talk to their senators. The senators said, no. You're very sweet, but that is not the way it works. Then in 2013, in November, suddenly that was the way it worked. And everybody was pre-wrong about that, except me, of course, who was pre-right. Anyway, this happens a lot. It happened earlier and in other slightly different contexts. I remember, what jumps out to me is a running battle with, who are we talking about? Kent Conrad, when he was chair of the Senate Budget Committee, I think, and there was a fight over, it must probably have been the passage of the Affordable Care Act, maybe, and using reconciliation to do it, and that certain things had to happen first. It was an order of operations that he insisted had to be true, such that it would end up defeating any ability to include, let's say, a public option in things, or that the House version, which was slightly better, could be the one that they voted on, but instead the Senate wanted to jam the House. And, because of the procedural history, that has to happen first. You can't do it this way. But in reality, you could do it that way, and it had been done that way. But again, it was a question of, who knows better, the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee or some blogger loser? It happens. But yeah, every once in a while, you'll find out Congress doesn't know what's going on. And I guess if you have worked there, as I have, you realize that on a day-to-day basis, that's the case. The members are far too busy with far too many things. They rely on staff to know literally what's going on. And very often, the routine day in, day out functioning of Congress, whatever the hell's going on the floor, they don't know about it. You are literally handing them a sheet with, a photocopy of something that came from the caucus that says what bills are on the floor today. And you write Y or N next to them and hand them the sheet. I don't have time to look at every stupid bill that's coming up. Some of them, big deals, they know they've been involved with, or it's been in the newspaper all the time. They know whether they favor or oppose it. But some of the other things that they never heard of, most of the voting that's going on is, some 20-something staffer handed me a thing with a Y on it. And I voted yes. And if I'm in trouble about it, call my press secretary. And they will corner the staffer who said Y, the letter Y, and ask him, what's the reason? I need to tell the press. And then officially, for the record, the reason that Congressman Jones voted yes on this bill is blah, 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 blah. Does Congressman Jones know that? No, not at all. The staffer said it. Did they give it to the chief of staff who said, yeah, that's defensible, go print it? Yep. Did the member ever see it? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Did the member of Congress know what was going on? Not on your life, not a chance. But the apparatus came to their rescue, and for the record, they knew what was going on, and it was this. That's the reality. So yeah, they're probably right here. Whether they're right or wrong on the AI front, the most shocking thing we'll see greater public awareness of, possibly because of Doge, possibly because of something else, is the degree to which Congress doesn't know what's going on. Now the rest of this. Again, now we're going to read Jennifer Palka's take on this stuff. This is likely spot on. The reality is that in many domains, the regulatory and spending complexity, this is more about the AI part, is such that it's very hard for anyone to know what's going on. You might think it's Congress's job to understand how the laws they've written have been operationalized, but that's actually one of their chief complaints, that they don't really understand what happens within the agency. That is to say, it's not that they're so dumb they don't even understand the bills they're passing. It's The complaint is, the one that they put on record is, well, I understand the bills we're passing. I just don't understand how agencies are implementing it. They sometimes come up with interpretations of the things we voted for that don't make any sense to us and that we claim are in contravention of what our intent was. Right? So this is one of their chief complaints. They don't really understand what happens within the agencies, and they don't always think it's consistent with their intentions. And the agencies themselves are dealing with the accretive nature of what comes down from Congress. New laws naturally reference and amend old laws, creating one confusing web of language. That's easy to see why that's the case, right? Then there's the web of regulations that previous staff at the agencies have written, not to mention the policies, forms, and the processes that have been born from those regulations that seem to carry the weight of the law, but are really somewhat arbitrary expressions of one way they could be operationalized. It becomes hard to sort out what cannot be changed without an act of Congress from what would need a new rule, perhaps, instead. And therefore, of course, a rulemaking process from which could entirely once again, I got to reread this sentence for you. It becomes hard to sort out what cannot be changed without an act of Congress from what would need a new rule and therefore a new rulemaking process from what could entirely legally be modified if only Bob over in compliance would stop threatening to call the inspector general about it, right? We can do this, but that guy says if you do it, I'm going to start an IG investigation. And actually, even these things sometimes, she adds parenthetically, can be changed over Bob's objections, of course, but the team is then saddled with an IG inquiry, which will detract from other priorities, right? So another level of the realities of things. You can't do that. No, I can do that. But if I do that, I'm going to invite problems. I might be able to clear the hurdles of those problems and succeed and prevail in an IG investigation, but I'm going to have to spend a lot of time placating the IG. So sometimes I'm just not going to do it, even though I can, just to avoid trouble with the IG. That's an excellent point in itself. Francis Maude was the minister for the Cabinet Office when the UK, that's what we're talking about here in this example, when the UK stood up the Government Digital Service. He was its chief champion and protector. I don't know where this is going. Let's keep going with it. Being minister for the Cabinet Office is like being the White House chief of staff, but with cross-government efficiency and reform, cybersecurity and digital transformation, and coordination between different government departments thrown in. We don't have anything quite like it, but okay. A very big job and a very important position. Not only did he back GDS despite fierce overt and covert opposition, he also led an efficiency program that saved $75 billion and a superb open data program. After all that, he told me, and here's the quote, I and my immediate team were absolutely exhausted. It was the emotional wear and tear of having to check every single thing you're told unless you're absolutely confident of its provenance. Wow, where does that sounds familiar, actually. Totally different context, but pretty much what I'm saying. Well, certainly about governing by tweet, anyway. But also, you got to check the provenance of your electoral college certificates these days. Anyway, of having to say, the exhaustion comes from having to say 4 times a day, show me the chapter and verse. Show me where it says we can't do this. It just grinds you down. So imagine how that would be in the U.S. government, right? Imagine now DOJ walking into agencies on January 21st and not having to say that 4 times a day. If they're building good AI models, and let's hope testing them, and quite honestly, they're not. But then they're not going to ask that at all. They're going to know what's legal and what's not. AI can't tell you that. There's no chance. It can tell you what's said, what's on the record. It can't tell you whether or not you're going to be able to overrule it, certainly, or whether it's okay to ignore it and for how long. But they're going to know, allegedly, what's legal and what's not, or at least think they'll know. It's all always open to interpretation, of course. Right there, the wall I talked about on Friday is immediately pierced. It's not so much an information asymmetry we'll be looking at, but an asymmetry of understanding and of confidence, merited or not, in their ability to act and act fast. Oh boy, we're at a huge disadvantage on that front. It should also be a huge wake-up call for Congress, as this commenter points out, the commenter to the Friday post from Jennifer, what was it, Palco? But, so as Daryl Harb, I guess, points out, Congress seems to have talked endlessly about AI over the past 2 years, but on a practical basis is taking a quite conservative approach to its own uses of it, which is probably wise at this stage. The team at PopVox has been following this closely as they attempt to help the first branch address what founder Marcy Harris, I know her from the old blogging days, Marcy Harris, not Marcy Wheeler, calls the pacing problem, as societal needs and technological progress change rapidly, but government does not. And beware here of the people who will say, well, one of the things we should do is go paperless. No. For reasons before explained. In September, the House released a policy that, quote, establishes a new restrictive framework with Committee on House Administration and Chief Administrative Officer as gatekeeper through which members and staff must proactively seek pre-approval for new uses or tools. That means that ChatGPT Plus is still the only commercial AI tool approved for use in the House. Oh boy, there should be none. PopVox wishes for better, which is kind of unfortunate. I guess they mean different AI tools. I mean, maybe it's dumb to have only one be allowed, but of course, maybe it's dumb to have any allowed. In our view, from PopVox, the new policy, if followed by lawmakers and policy staff, would significantly curtail their ability to fully understand the tools and technologies that they are endeavoring to regulate in their policy roles. All right, I'm starting to get more further afield here. Let's see if it comes back. It may also significantly curtail their ability to understand their own work, both legislative and oversight, and act quickly, right as a potentially adversarial actor is emerging. Most commentary on DOGE has pitted it against the agencies it has vowed to drastically cut, but Congress is going to want to have a say in what they propose to do. And, of course, the executive branch is legally bound, maybe, to spend what Congress has appropriated, though the Trump administration has signaled an interest in challenging or ignoring the Impoundment Control Act of 1974, which, according to statements from the Democrats in the House Committee on Budget, established procedures. And again, here's bad framing. According to the statement from the Democrats, no. According to the fact of the Impoundment Control Act. You can read it and see what it says. But now it's framed as according to Democrats. It established procedures to prevent the president and other government officials from unilaterally substituting their own funding decisions for those of the Congress. It did do that. That's what it says. You could ignore it. You can break it. But that's what it says. Not according to Democrats, according to eyeballs and brains that can read the thing. That's what it says. In other words, if the budget passed by Congress says we're spending this, then we're spending this. Doge or Trump be damned. I have no idea how that is going to play out legally. I have some. But I do suspect that if Doge has the tools my commenter thinks they probably already have at their disposal, one party in this brewing fight is going to have some significant advantages. Marcy's pacing problem frames the fast pace of change in society at large against a slow pace in government, but we may be about to see a massive pacing problem, a dramatic speed asymmetry within government itself. Let me also caution you that you might be seeing a lying problem. Well, you can't and shouldn't be commenting on our reform proposal because you're too dumb and too slow. We're using super duper very smart AI, which strangely enough happens to spit out exactly the answers we were looking for. Also, I programmed it, and no, you may not look in the black box. That's not a great place to start from. Marcy reminds me that the Impoundment Control Act that reinforced the executive branch's obligation to spend according to the budget also set up the Congressional Budget Office. Congress wanted this because it didn't trust Nixon's Office of Management and Budget to be the single source of truth on cost benefit. It makes sense. You never want to have to rely on analysis done by an adversary when you're negotiating. And remember, you're negotiating between branches here, which, at that point was adversarial. Now it won't be adversarial anymore because they're controlled by not only the same party, but a cult of personality as well. So it'll be really interesting, right? It's not just the OMB saying this. The congressional budget says it. And you know they're impartial. We fired the last guy who wouldn't do what we wanted it to do. Anyway, the instincts that led them to beef up their own muscle, Congress, then should be kicking in now. Beef up their own muscle then should be kicking in now, and it might start by giving themselves access to a full range of tools at their disposal. I don't know if that's really a great answer, though even that full range of tools may be child's play compared with Doge's arsenal. I hear rumors that Elon has about 40 or so engineers already squirreled away in the building near Lafayette Square. I have no special knowledge, but what I imagine them doing is exactly what our commenter here suggested, spinning up AI systems that are going to change the playing field in ways few in Washington understand. I'm curious to see what happens when January 21st comes around and Elon lets the Doge out. Transition might be a little different this time. Certainly could be true. I think the warning to take away from there is Doge and the Trump administration essentially, this is really interesting, given their complaints about huge election fraud. We got to seize the election machines and take a look at their source code. But they're going to do Doge by, an AI system, or what I said was an AI system that I designed and that you may not examine, says scientifically that these are our priorities for government going forward. And no, you may not look at it. And I guess the complaint outlined here from PopVox and agreed with by the author is, well, Congress needs its own black box. Well, maybe, except that Congress is controlled by the same cult of personality that is cheering for Doge. So I don't know. But I guess to the extent that they jealously guard their own prerogatives, they might want to have their own black box, which solves nothing. I would say that one check on it, though, is definitely don't fall for the idea that we should be going paperless in some things for the sake of efficiency, because that may be our only ability to, slow things down. And courts are going to want to see the record on this stuff. And there will be some courts, if they're still following the law, are going to say, no, this black box junk doesn't work. That violates our arbitrary and capricious standard of administrative law. But then other judges, Trump appointees, might be found who say, no, it doesn't. Let's go forward. That's a real big black box problem, something we really ought to keep in mind. So, all right, I'm glad we spent some time on it. It was a little bit esoteric, but I think it made a good point that we'll want to carry over into how we watch this administration unfold. Okay. There's a couple of other things that we probably ought to spend some time on. The big break is coming once again. So let's introduce a theme and see if we can get through it. How about some Greg Sargent, who I guess spent some time talking to lawyers about the supposed criminal referral from the Loudermilk report saying that Liz Cheney ought to be charged with a crime. Have you been thinking that perhaps the speech or debate clause might not, why isn't that being invoked to protect her work? And the answer is, I don't know, but it should. But then again, let's get in front of a Trump judge. A Trump judge certainly could get this case and say, to hell with that. But Marcy Wheeler has pointed out, the reality is that probably this case will be handled inside the D.C. area, and under the D.C. Circuit rules, current precedent is, there's still a speech or debate clause, and it can't just be waved away. And as Marcy had pointed out, Scott Perry just prevailed in his case under the same protection. However, that just means that Scott Perry has already gotten what he wants out of the law. Now it doesn't matter anymore whether that law still stands and can be used for the protection of any other members of Congress, particularly members of Congress that we don't like very much, or people who were once members of Congress anyway. So it's not entirely convincing, but her better point is, if the case is brought here in D.C., there's still a fairly good chance that you'll get a judge that's real. But, they might also say, this case is being filed in, I don't know, let's say the Northern District of Texas. On what basis? On the basis that that judge there will find that there's actually jurisdiction. There isn't, but they'll invent it. So what's the piece that we were reading from? Greg Sargent's piece in the New Republic. Trump's rage at Liz Cheney takes a dark turn and wrecks a big GOP lie. Well, takes a dark turn. We already knew about that. What's the big GOP lie that's being wrecked? Well, that might be of some interest. But, because they're hypocrites, it also might not be. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Now we really got to hustle. I keep saying it. Let's start here, though, with Greg Sargent's piece. Trump's rage at Liz Cheney takes a dark turn, we know, and wrecks a big GOP lie. We don't know yet. Trump says Cheney might be, quote, in trouble. That's his way of leveraging a threat, right? Based on something cooked up by House Republicans, the Loudermilk report, if you care to even call it that. That, though, demolishes the GOP's spin about what? About Kash Patel's plans for the FBI. Why? Well, yes and no. But let's see what he's talking about here. Barely moments after Donald Trump announced that he'd chosen loyalist Kash Patel as FBI director, Republicans stampeded forth to insist that this in no way means Trump will unleash law enforcement on his enemies, even though Trump himself has threatened to do so. And I should add here, Kash Patel has said that he lives for nothing but to do that. Senator John Cornyn suggested such threats were only for public consumption. Senator Rick Scott said Trump is, quote, not going to do it. Not going to do it. Remember that one? Okay. And Representative Dan Muser, I don't even know who that is, scoffed that the very idea is nonsense. These lawmakers should take a moment to consult Trump's Truth Social feed. Oh, what? They'll be convinced then, right? At 3:11 a.m., on Wednesday, demonstrating characteristic emotional balance, Trump posted this reaction to a new report from a House subcommittee chaired by GOP Representative Barry Loudermilk, which recommends that the FBI, imagine that, FBI investigate former GOP Representative Liz Cheney over her role in the House's January 6th inquiry. Liz Cheney could be in a lot of trouble based on the evidence obtained by the subcommittee, which states that, quote, numerous federal laws were likely broken by Liz Cheney, and these violations should be investigated by the FBI, unquote. Thank you to Congressman Barry Loudermilk on a job well done. Note the trademark mob speak here. Cheney could be in a lot of trouble for federal lawbreaking. Trump declares as if he's merely a passive observer, remarking on the danger she faces, rather than someone who will control the nation's sprawling law enforcement apparatus in just over a month. Trump has been raging at Cheney for years and has amplified suggestions that she should face televised military tribunals, of all things. Imagine that. Now, in a dark turn in this whole farcical saga, Trump is pretending that House Republicans have given him a legitimate basis for prosecuting Cheney, when in fact their claims were cooked up in bad faith for precisely that purpose. Indeed, read this way, Trump's new missive actually wrecks the spin from Republicans that there's no reason to fear that Patel will improperly wield law enforcement against his political enemies, even though Patel has vowed to do exactly that. It clearly signals that this is exactly what Trump expects from him. Oh, gee. For starters, the House GOPS report, or the report's claim that Cheney, quote, likely broke federal laws is, quote, likely entirely baseless. The report argues that as vice chair of the House committee that investigated Trump's insurrection on January 6th, Cheney may have violated statutes barring witness tampering and the subornation of perjury. But legal experts tell me the allegations are extremely thin. This is just, well, isn't talking to a witness really witness tampering? Well, it is if you kind of do it outside of the context of examination. But wait and see. Wait and see what was actually being done here. The witness tampering claim is based on the charge that Cheney improperly communicated with Cassidy Hutchinson, a Trump White House aide who delivered damning testimony against Trump without her lawyer's knowledge. But as Cheney and Hutchinson have already detailed in their books, and the report itself recounts, Hutchinson is the one who initiated direct contact with Cheney, apparently without that lawyer's knowledge, asking Cheney to recommend new attorneys that she might choose from to replace him. That's interesting all by itself. One, this isn't Cheney initiating the conversation. And two, well, you spoke to her without her lawyer's knowledge. Yeah, what she was asking was, I think the lawyer that I have, and she's right about this, the lawyer that I have is paid for by the White House, the Trump political operation anyway. And I mean, it's a basic truism that you kind of learn in law school. You know, a lawyer that you have that's arguing your case for you that is paid for by somebody else, that other person, the person who's paying is the real client. And if you want to be sure that, at least according to ethics rules, I mean, they could be violating the ethics rules, but if you want, in order to, I guess we'll put it this way, in order to make sure that the ethics rules are operating in your favor such that you can be certain that you can at least sue your lawyer if they're not acting in your best interest, that means you got to hire them. You got to be the one paying. If somebody else steps in and says, I'll provide the lawyer, I'll pay, that lawyer works for that person. And if that person is Donald Trump and you're being called as a witness against Donald Trump, you need a new lawyer. And any lawyer will tell you that. And that's what Liz Cheney told Cassidy Hutchinson when she asked. And that is now supposedly witness tampering. I don't think so. Okay, so the witness tampering claim is based on that exchange. The GOP report insists that such a consultation behind a lawyer's back was nonetheless unethical in an attorney. Cheney is also a lawyer. But law professor Jonathan Turley, not exactly a resistance liberal, has noted that Cheney was functioning as a member of Congress in doing this, not as a lawyer, and that in pursuing the matter with Hutchinson, she was doing her congressional duty to pursue a witness. Wow. Jonathan Turley is even against this. Nor does the report demonstrate, if you've lost Jonathan Turley, right? So, nor does the report demonstrate that what Cheney did was witness tampering, said National Security lawyer Bradley Moss. For this to be criminal tampering, Cheney would have had to work to get Hutchinson to change her testimony, to provide knowingly false information. Moss told me. The report does not provide anything remotely sufficient to substantiate that. In fact, you know, what really needs to be demonstrated here is, I think, it's the opposite of witness tampering. The lawyer that had been handed to Hutchinson by the Trump team was advising her to give testimony favorable to Trump. And what Cheney was saying was, listen, if you have testimony that you feel you honestly need to give, that's other than what you're being advised by the Trump attorney assigned to you, you need to not give in to their witness tampering. They're the ones tampering with you. They're telling you you need to tell a story other than the one you feel is the truth, right? I'm advising you, get a lawyer who will advise you, tell the truth, untamper what's happening here. But of course, as with everything, right? If you release a poll that's bad for Trump, that's election interference. If you tell a witness that we've successfully tampered with to not submit to our tampering, that's witness tampering. We had it all lined up. She was going to lie for us. You told her, don't lie for them. Tell the truth. Witness tampering on its face. We had it set up. You unset it up. That's tampering. She's a witness. You tampered. Whew, wow. Is that inside out? The same goes for the claim that Cheney may have unlawfully gotten Hutchinson to commit perjury. That too, same inversion of the truth here. That, according to Moss, again, the report details what it insists are Hutchinson's falsehoods to the January 6th committee. But remember, the report is from the Republicans investigating the committee. But Moss argues that the findings don't show that Hutchinson knowingly made false claims. And regardless, the GOP report, quote, produces zero evidence that Cheney herself instructed Hutchinson to provide knowingly false statements. It doesn't even provide evidence that Cheney instructed Hutchinson to provide true statements. She just said, if you want to give testimony other than what your lawyer is trying to make you do, get a new lawyer. This is political cover for what Trump really wants, an excuse to prosecute Cheney, Moss concluded. Christy Parker, counsel at Protect Democracy and a former federal prosecutor herself, agrees that the GOP report is exceedingly weak. The FBI has very strict guidelines for when they can open investigations, or at least they used to. Patel wants to get rid of that. Parker said, the GOP report does not provide any information that would credibly justify a criminal inquiry. That's why they'll bring in Kash Patel to change the guidelines so that they can say, oh, look, now there is information that would credibly justify a criminal inquiry. Under the new rule, which says anything I say is grounds for a criminal inquiry is grounds for a criminal inquiry. Many of the headlines about the House GOP report and Trump's endorsement of it treat this moment as akin to an ordinary political battle. This is also a big point. House Republicans call for Liz Cheney to be investigated over the January 6th committee role. Her committee role blared the New York Times. NBC News told readers that, quote, Republicans say Liz Cheney should be investigated. That's extraordinarily weak framing for Republicans, but still, somewhere in the headline, there needs to be room for, but this weird, stupid parchment thing that the founders wrote called the Constitution says otherwise. And I mean, really strongly, really very strongly, and on its face. But not in the headline. Meanwhile, a CNN headline read that the House GOP is siding with Trump against Cheney, quote, after investigating January 6th. And that's the end of it. As if the GOP probe was merely another good faith effort to gather facts about that day. Well, they were investigating the investigation. That's actually worth saying, right? Politico went with Trump, Liz Cheney, quote, could be in a lot of trouble, unquote, over January 6th committee, treating Trump's comment as a conventional statement from a politician about Cheney's legal situation. Casual readers of these headlines might come away believing we're having a real debate over whether Cheney did break federal laws and that Trump has a genuine public-spirited interest in determining whether that legitimately happened. But the real story here is the public conduct of Trump and Republicans, not that of Liz Cheney or what Trump supposedly, quote, believes about it. Trump is demonstrating that he's eager for Cheney's prosecution to proceed regardless of whether there's any legitimate basis for it. The story is that House Republicans are abusing their public roles to create a phony pretext for something that Trump already intended to do anyway. Wield law enforcement as a weapon against his enemies with no serious legal predicate. And Senate Republicans appear willing to confirm Patel while knowing full well that Trump has expressly chosen him to carry out this extraordinary and degenerate abuse of power. All of that is the story. How is it conceivable that the media is treating this as a conventional political moment? Trump's veiled threat towards Cheney should prompt the press to revisit those assurances from Republicans about Patel. GOP senators should be hounded mercilessly by reporters on whether they'll knowingly support Patel now that Trump has made the corrupt reality of the situation so inescapably, alarmingly clear. Well, to thinking people. The problem is, to dummies, well, maybe it's not so clear. And that's how they tend to get away with it. Now, I think one of the people quoted in this piece caught my eye this morning and pointing out, Christy Parker said, so she's got a little thread about having been quoted in it saying, I'm quoted in this smart piece, because it quoted her, by Greg Sargent's over Trump's MAGA allies trying to create bogus predicates for investigating people who've done nothing that remotely approaches a crime. Don't let them do it. The second bit in the thread here, Kash Patel should be confronted with this, but he should also be careful what he wishes for. If he goes forward with the sham investigation, Liz Cheney will put on Jack Smith's case, and she'll win. That's an interesting point too, right? She'll, if she's prosecuted, she'll basically be reading out what Jack Smith was prevented from bringing in court by the immunity claims and the judges having, being forced to dismiss the cases now that Trump is going to be president again. And that'll be an interesting way to get those things on the record, unless, of course, they bring the case somehow in the Northern District of Texas. Yeah, so that's something to watch out for, too. All right. Again, running a little late here. What else do I want to bring to you? Some of these things I'm just going to have to do as headlines. And other things I want to read deeper into. Let me just run back to Pocket for a second. There's definitely one or two things here that we can summarize rather quickly. All right, one of them, this is an interesting thing, and you should read it. And you should read it in the context of the Doge thing, like, government efficiency, and we got to cut out the pork, and waste, fraud, and abuse kind of thing. The headline in the Washington Post sets up for outrage, but it's actually the sort of thing that, you fall into pretty easily thinking you're doing the right thing. This is a report on the title of "The U.S. Seized a Russian Yacht. Now you're paying for it. Arrgh, I'm so angry." And, the tidbits that it offers up, it's one of those interactive pieces. As you scroll, more text reveals itself, and then there's an image. On June 2nd, 2022, the United States government spent $12,458 to scrub the hull of a Russian oligarch's super yacht. Oh, what? How dare... Right. 6 days later, U.S. taxpayers spent $52,717.08, primarily on meat, fish, dairy, bread, spices, and other groceries for the 30 crew members of the luxury vessel, named the Amadea. But 5 days later, taxpayers shelled out an additional $277,200 on this stupid boat, this time to put 52,800 gallons of fuel in the 6-deck yacht ahead of its voyage from Fiji to San Diego, where it's been docked on America's dime for most of the past 2 years. On and on with this stuff. But just quickly, to give you a sense of what I've been thinking about this thing, you'll read the story. You should. It's interesting. What was the intention here? Of course, sanctions against Russian oligarchs. Well, we'll seize their assets. They're billionaires driving around in these, multi-billion-dollar yachts. Here's one of those yachts. There's not on it. Let's seize it. And the idea was, we'll seize it, we'll sell it, and we'll use the proceeds to send aid to Ukraine. Kind of brilliant, sort of, in an abstract sort of way. Actually, the sort of thing that you would think that the Doge guys will end up proposing. But the problem is this. Any boat owner or anybody who's been near a boat owner knows the old joke that the two best days in a boat owner's life, you ever heard that old joke? The day they buy the boat and the day they sell it, right? Boats are headaches, huge headaches and huge money sinks, especially super yachts. And the amount of money it requires to maintain the things is ridiculous and stupid. I think we've noted this before at some point in the past. Maybe we had the same problem already. But in order to maintain a super yacht in saleable condition, for instance, if you want to sell the thing, and you don't want to junk it. Apparently you got to keep it running the whole time, and you got to keep, like, the interior has to be air conditioned because in the humid climates around the ocean, mold, mildew, the whole place is destroyed. So you got to, like, air condition it, and that means thousands and thousands of gallons of fuel. And yeah, you need to keep cleaning it and maintaining it if you want it to be saleable. Otherwise, like, you're going to get $6 for it because it's wrecked, and then there's not going to be any money for Ukraine. So you maintain it in the hopes that you'll sell it soon. But one of the other things I think that's underlying all of this is, does anybody want to be the guy that buys the murderous Russian oligarch's boat and sail it around, where you can hire pirate crews to hijack you and take it back? I mean, I think if you buy a Russian oligarch's boat, you might get murdered fast, or at least have that boat stolen away from you. I think that there's a real hesitancy to buy the thing. I mean, I think maybe the better thing to do is to buy it and sink it, or seize it and sink it. Or I guess you might find a willing buyer in Hollywood who said, yeah, we'll blow it up on film for a movie. At least then it can't be seized back, but then you'll find, your horse's head in your bed or something like that. I don't think anybody wants to touch these things. So as it turns out, it may be a really stupid idea. But what are you going to do? I mean, I think they should sink the things, I guess. Have the Navy blow them up and sink them. But in order to do that, by the way, you're going to have to crew the thing and sail it somewhere, and that means feeding the crew, and it means putting 58,000 gallons of fuel in it to sail out into the ocean where you can't just blow it up in a dock in San Diego or Fiji, right? There's a working marina there. So you got to move it somewhere. It's going to cost money. That's what boat ownership is all about. But I'm just curious. I want that. Like a piece like this, which is, outrage because the government is doing, what the hell does Biden think he's doing? I thought he hated the Russians. Why are we maintaining a Russian super yacht? Well, it was to do something everybody thought was a great idea at the outset. But as it turns out, this fantastic reform idea actually sucks. And I feel like AI is going to hand us a few more of these before we're done. Okay. So that was one I wanted to get on the record. It's something you should maybe read over the weekend. It's kind of funny and interesting in the details. All right. A couple other things that I'm not going to be able to get through all the way. I don't know. Maybe the more important of which, I don't know, is, I can't believe I'm about to do this to myself. Marcy Wheeler. Oh no. I love reading Marcy Wheeler's pieces, but they're weedy. But she's making a good point that's been more in keeping with the theme of what we've been talking about than the other story I wanted to bring you. So here's what it is. Her piece is titled, begins with a quote, "Friendly to Us." That's the quote. What's she talking about? New York Times buries its own role in Trump's attacks on the rule of law. Oops. What's happening? Let's see if we can run through it quickly. There's no way to do Marcy quickly, but here we go. There comes a time in almost every Trump legal scandal where evidence comes out that Trump insiders believe they've manipulated Maggie Haberman of the New York Times to serve Trump's interests. Gosh, this keeps happening. Evidence that both Roger Stone and Rick Gates used Maggie for various purposes came out in the Mueller investigation files. As long ago as that, eh? As when Gates claimed leaking Trump's foreign policy speech, a speech, which one, I don't know. If you've been following Marcy all along, you know exactly which one. Gates claimed leaking Trump's foreign policy speech to Maggie Haberman was a way to share it with Stone. And there's a screen grab of a log of text conversations that go on between Rick Gates and Roger Stone. And it basically, Rick Gates shouting, "I cannot learn about a foreign policy speech from the media. This is personally embarrassing. I'm out. Good luck." Roger Stone, that was, I guess, Stone saying it to Gates. I think I've got it backwards. And Gates saying, "I called Maggie to leak it. You gave me her number last night, remember?" Stone says, no detail on the venue, no input on content, no follow-through with carefully selected reporters, while Manafort, PJM, I think, Manafort meets with reporters who have effed us and are close to Corey, I guess Lewandowski. I can go on, but why? I'm having no impact. Won't be treated this way. And then Stone saying, well, I'm just blowing off steam. Won't bail out, but damn pissed off. Going to have a drink. Talk in the morning. And Rick Gates answering, stay focused. We have a long way to go. What is this about? All right. At Trump's New York trial, the hush money one, I guess, Michael Cohen described how he deliberately misled Maggie Haberman about the nature of the payments that he made to Stormy Daniels. Perhaps the most damning example came in Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. Oh no, her again, huh? Where she described how, after her last appearance before the January 6th committee, while still represented by Stefan Passantino, the lawyer she was looking to chuck over, he took a call from Maggie Haberman and confirmed that Hutchinson had just finished testifying to the committee. What's the problem with that? This is Cassidy Hutchinson testifying about it, saying his phone is ringing. Her lawyer is taking a phone call while she's testifying. What? I looked down at his phone, and it's Maggie Haberman calling him. And I looked at Stefan, and I said, Stefan, did you tell Maggie Haberman that we were meeting with the committee today? I don't know whether he pronounces it Stephen, but it's S-T-F-A-N, so I'm saying Stefan. Stefan, did you tell Maggie Haberman that we were meeting with the committee today? And he's like, no, maybe that's not what she's calling about. And I said, Stefan, did you tell Maggie that we were meeting with the committee today? And he said, no, but I probably should answer to see if she knows, right? I should answer. And I said, Stefan, no, I don't think you should answer that call. She probably wants to know if we met with the committee today, and we're trying to keep that, secret. He said, Cass, I'm just going to answer. It'll be 2 seconds. I just want to find out what she's going to talk about in her column. And he answers. Now, I can't hear what she's saying, but I hear Stefan say, yeah, we did just leave her third interview. You can put it out, but don't make too big a deal out of it. I don't think she'll want it to be too big of a deal. All right? Thanks. Now, she had just said, I don't want her to know at all. Well, you should go out and say that, but don't make a big deal out of it. And I said, Stefan, was that Maggie Haberman asking about my interview? And he said, yeah, but don't worry. She's not going to make a big deal out of it. Well, I mean, I hope not, right? And I said, Stefan, I don't want this out there. He said, don't worry. Like, Maggie's friendly to us. We'll be fine. So I was just like, whatever. I was annoyed. Well, Marcy's going to take this apart. But just for a second here, right, do you see why Liz Cheney thought it might be of interest for Cassidy Hutchinson to get a new lawyer? She's explicitly instructing her lawyer not to do this, and he does it right in front of her face and then says, no, I didn't. Well, I did. But it'll be good. It will not be good. Now, Hutchinson went on to describe how, even as Passantino was discouraging Hutchinson from reviewing documents in a SCIF, a secure location, a secure facility, that would allow a follow-up appearance, Passantino and Alex Cannon spent the weekend talking to Maggie about Hutchinson's testimony. So I reached out to him on Monday, May 23rd. Has, redacted, reached out about the SCIF, and then he was just kind of being wishy-washy with it. He also let me know on that phone conversation that Maggie Haberman, quote, got a story from the committee about my third interview, end quote. And Stefan spent the whole weekend with Alex Cannon convincing Maggie Haberman not to publish the story that she got from the committee about my third interview. But we see where she got the story on. From him. Hutchinson described her particular disinterest in sharing her story with Maggie and Josh Dawsey, another Trump whisperer, and describes it this way. And so now we're moving into the phase of, I did my best throughout this whole period. I don't like talking to reporters. Reporters would text me during this period. 99% of reporters' texts go unresponded to. I don't like talking to reporters. I think that there are some that I have like a friendship or working relationship with that I knew from being on the Hill and at the White House. But like Josh Dawsey, Maggie Haberman, all those people, I stay very clear from. But Josh Dawsey, for example, had started reaching out to me and saying that he heard that the committee was in talks with Stefan about bringing me in for a SCIF interview and live testimony. And where did I stand on that with Stefan? So say what you will about Maggie's role in all this. Assuming it was her on Passantino's phone, Hutchinson does not name the journalist in her book. Well, she was just chasing a big story. But there's no doubt that one source of Hutchinson's distrust in Passantino in the period leading up to her decision to get new lawyers stemmed from his willingness to share details of her testimony with Maggie Haberman, at least as she portrayed it, against her wishes. I don't think you should answer that call, Hutchinson said. Don't worry, the attorney representing Hutchinson, allegedly, but paid by a Trump entity, had told her, like Maggie's friendly to us, we'll be fine. And here we get into the second issue with all of this. None of that shows up in the New York Times' faux savvy review of the game behind Barry Loudermilk's referral of Liz Cheney for criminal investigation for allegedly intervening in Hutchinson's legal representation at the time. The New York Times does not bother to disclose to readers that, as Hutchinson described it, Maggie Haberman, who is bylined on the story, played a significant role in the breakup of the relationship between Passantino and Hutchinson, as Cheney did. Now, having failed to disclose Maggie's alleged role in all that, here's how, starting in the 28th paragraph in, the New York Times ultimately describes Loudermilk's report and the claims within it. Well, it's a very long quote, but suffice to say, the House report on Ms. Cheney, prepared by a Republican-led subcommittee on oversight, was specifically focused on the former representative who broke with her GOP colleagues over their ongoing support of Mr. Trump in 2021. Well, anyway, suffice to say this. They lay it all, they take the Loudermilk line, that it was Cheney that interfered to break up their relationship. No mention at all in the New York Times' own reporting, indeed Maggie Haberman's own reporting, that she was inserting herself into the attorney-client relationship here that caused Cassidy Hutchinson to realize she had a real trust issue with the attorney that she thought was working for her. That's why she went to Liz Cheney and said, am I supposed to get out of this relationship or what? How can I get away from this guy? He's screwing me over to the New York Times right in front of my face. Not mentioned once in Maggie Haberman's reporting, oddly enough.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, that wraps it up. That's all we have time for. I really wanted to get to some interesting reporting about the childhood background of Trump's Surgeon General designee. Maybe we'll get to that next week. In the meantime, stay tuned now for Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Trump and Musk's threats start off from the top, as they should. Let's hear his thoughts on them next. We'll see you next week.